Thank you, everybody. I'd like to make a couple of initial comments and then open it up for a few questions. We were delighted here to participate in a closed session of the UN Security Council on the Syrian issue. Today, the U.S. delegation, first of all, raised the horrific situation in Idlib and our demand that a ceasefire be implemented as soon as possible. We feel that this is absolutely a threat to peace, not just in Syria, but in the region, and it needs to be dealt with as soon as possible. There's 3.5 million civilians whose lives and places of refuge are being put in danger right now as we speak here. And again, that's our first priority. We talked about longer-term efforts to resolve the crisis in Syria that's been going on since 2011, and our full confidence and support in Geir Peterson, who was just here to talk to you, in his way forward, which we fully endorse and are working closely with him on. Once again, we want to resolve this conflict not only because of the internal dimension of it, as terrible as that is, but because it has drawn in 5 outside powers whose military forces are engaged in one or another operation for their own security inside of Syria and run the risk of colliding with each other. We're particularly concerned about Iranian power projection out of Syria aimed at our friends and allies in the region. Finally, we talked a bit about the discussions that Secretary of State Pompeo and I had in Sochi, Russia, with Foreign Minister Lavrov and President Putin, and the potential way forward to see a step-by-step implementation of UN Resolution 2254 in return for steps that would allow a Syrian government that adheres to 2254 to move back into the international community. But this is just a potential way forward because so far we haven't seen steps such as a ceasefire in Idlib, such as the convening of the Constitutional Committee that would give us confidence that the Assad regime actually understands what it must do to help end this conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. A couple of follow-ups to what you said. From your meeting in the Security Council, did you get any sense that the U.S. call for an immediate ceasefire will be responded to positively? And in your talks with President Putin and Foreign Minister Lavrov, did you get a sense that they actually do want to see and work for a political settlement to this conflict?
First of all, I can't characterize in detail what went on in the closed session other than the U.S. position, but I would have to say in all of our contacts, here and bilaterally, there is overwhelming international support for an immediate ceasefire in Idlib, and this international support is only growing. In terms of working with the Russians in Sochi, we believe that there is a sincere interest in finding a solution to this conflict, but this is going to take hard decisions not only by us, but hard decisions by the Russians and hard decisions most of all by the Syrian regime.
James Bates from Al Jazeera. Back to Idlib, 22 medical facilities that have been hit. Do these, in the view of the US, amount to war crimes? And what is the responsibility of Russia as it has aircraft in the air and is one of the guarantors of what is supposed to be a de-escalation zone?
Right, and you'll have an opportunity to ask the Russians about their justification for their actions. We're careful in defining things as war crimes or crimes of any sort. What we do say is that the attack on civilians, particularly on civilians who are trying to care for others, is abhorrent. It has to stop immediately. Well, the U.S. already has a broad palette of sanctions on the Syrian regime. We are working closely with the European Union, which has its own. We have a series of policies in terms of non-recognition of the regime in various international fora, limits on reconstruction of the destruction wrought mainly by the regime. So what we're looking at now is a set of primarily economic and diplomatic steps that will continue to keep this regime under pressure. And as long as the Idlib situation continues, we will look for ways to heighten that pressure.
Thank you. Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. Did the subject of chemical weapons come up in the closed consultations? And if so, can you give us a general characterization, at least as to what you expressed?
The U.S. position on chemical weapons use in Idlib or any place else in Syria is very clear. If we find clear evidence that the regime has used chemical weapons against its own people, the United States will take action, as the President has already committed us to, in consultation with close friends and allies. So I'll leave it at that.
Can we ask a question?
We can do one more.
President Putin, just about 2 weeks ago, he made a statement that he does not exclude the possibility of a full attack on Idlib. From your talks with the Russian leaders, did you feel there's a change of ideas? I mean, especially that the Council has made very clear that fighting terrorism cannot be used as a pretext to attack civilians.
First of all, we support that last statement. Our conversations with the Russians have not indicated that the Russians are ready to support a full-scale offensive into Idlib, but you have to ask the Russians for more details on that. They tell us that this is only a limited set of military operations against specific terrorists. But again, our first concern is not the terrorists, but our concern is the civilian population, of whom hundreds of thousands have already left their places of dwelling. I can't even call them homes because many of them are already refugees from other parts of Syria. Thank you very much. Thank you.